All right. Well, seeing the situation of my country, our country, Eritrea, in the spotlights of human rights, I was fortunate to take a class, International Human Rights Law, here at USF, University of San Francisco. And I was fortunate to have an amazing professor who has worked so much in the plight of human rights, upholding human rights and respect. She had an extensive research on Argentina, and she knows a lot about Eritrea. Professor Susanna Kaiser teaches at the Media Studies Department at the University of San Francisco. She earned her PhD from the Institute of Latin American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Her MA from the Department of Communication at Hunter College of the City University of New York, and her BA in Advertising from the Jesuit University of El Salvador in Buenos Aires, Argentina, her country of origin. Before coming to USF, she was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, Berkeley. Her research focuses on communication, cultural, political, memory, and human rights. Kaiser has written about the communication strategies developed by the mothers and the children of the disappeared. Those are the children of the disappeared are those who try to come to Latin America who try to come to USA, all the way from many different Latin American countries. A great research that she has done. So, with that being said, I want to welcome Professor Susanna Kaiser to introduce panelists and moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating, for me, learning experience today, and I was reflecting on the arrows that we have in the university that were saying that we're going to learn to change the world from here. And there was an event yesterday here, and the event was called Change the Here from Here. And I think that today we are changing the here from there, and I think that the arrows that we have here are a very good example of the multiple directions in which we all change each other, correct? I didn't know that much about Eritrea. I was very lucky to have met him as a student, and we educators always assume that we don't really teach, we learn as we teach, and the students teach us and learn at the same time. It's in the power of Freddy thing, we educate each other. So thank you for being here. For me, it's an honor to be here, and I'm learning much more about Eritrea just listening to all the wonderful presentations today. So we have two presenters today, and I have to look at my paper to introduce them. Change the glasses. So we have two panelists today. The first panelist is Simon Wendelhammer. Sorry about that. I'm translating from English, from Spanish into English. It's kind of complicated. Practices immigration law in his law office in Northern California. He's an academic trained and covers international human rights, law, and democratization with a specific focus on the African human rights system and thematically on the right to democratic governance, the right to self-determination, rights of women, minorities, and indigenous peoples. On these areas, Simon has published on many law journals. In his law office, Simon represents individuals who fled persecution and who seek refuge in the United States, thus working on the consequences of bad governance in many countries. So we are going to start with him, and then the second panelist, since I'm reading right now, is Tricia Redeker-Hepner. She's Associate Professor of Anthropology and Director of the Disasters, Displacement and Human Rights Program at the University of Tennessee. She is also the chair of the Committee for Human Rights of the American Anthropological Association and associate editor of the African Conflict and Peace Building Review. Her research to date has focused on the transnational political and legal dynamics of Eritrea and its global diasporas. Her research has been funded by the National Science Foundation, the Social Science Research Council, and the Warner Grant Foundation for Anthropological Research. In addition to her work in Eritrea, she has been studying the meaning of the missing and unidentified dead in northern Uganda's transnational justice process. So we have two amazing panelists, and we're going to start with Simon.
Can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Prof, and I'll go straight to the point. I think by now we know how bad the situation in Eritrea is, and when you are confronted with that kind of situation, it's very natural to ask what indeed is the international community doing about it. And when we speak about the international community, of course, the UN comes. So, when we speak about the international community, of course, the first institution that we mentioned is the United Nations Organization, that I'll be referring at the UN. And of course, something is going on at the UN, and I'm here to discuss what's happening there and the impact of those exercises. Yes, particularly since 2012, the UN has been looking at Eritrea very closely. We have investigators, and out of that exercise, we do have reports and resolutions. And I'll be discussing political impact of these resolutions or this process as a whole. And by political impact, I mean the impact of all these in correcting or removing the government that we have at home. At this point, I think I should make a disclaimer. I'm not the most qualified person to speak on this area. There are people, human rights activists everywhere, who work tirelessly to get us where we are now. They have been everywhere, presenting in sessions like these, doing other works. And some of them are overseas, others have other commitments to attend. It's because they are not here that I'm here by default. So, what is the impact of this process going on at the UN? What can we expect? Let me just throw the conclusion first, not that much. And I'll explain that in historical context. I think Professor knows more than me that international law has not been helpful in promoting human rights. Particularly for the last 100 years, several hundred years, we do have these principles, very big principles in international law, like state sovereignty, sovereign right of states, non-intervention in domestic affairs, and human rights are considered to be domestic affairs. So how a certain state treats its own citizens is not the business of other states. At least we came from that past. And because we are tied to that past, the institutional infrastructure for protecting and promoting human rights that we have is very ineffective. It's very weak. The most commonly used term to describe what we have is actually toothless. That's very sad. Those principles, you still find them in the UN Charter. If you consider the UN Charter as a world constitution, it even not in the Bill of Rights. You don't find elaborate provisions on human rights other than mentions there. Later on, people try to supply a Bill of Rights, and we have the Declaration and the Covenants. Under the UN, the human rights organ that we had in the past was the Human Rights Commission. Now that commission is replaced by the Human Rights Council. And when you look at the mechanisms for enforcing human rights globally, it's very weak. They either go, we have what we call reporting mechanisms. states are required to report these international bodies occasionally. The best we get from reporting is an honest discussion of the problems you have, solutions that you're able to discover, exchange of experiences. But he couldn't address the situation in Eritrea with those kind of mechanisms. Other than that, we have what we call working groups, experts, special reporters trying to address the situation in a certain country. At best, what we expect from these working groups, experts, and special reporters is the report. Even these reports, because they are in a very political body, they get watered down, toned down so often. They don't accurately reflect the reality. You don't expect exaggerations from hearing reports. They are understatements of the situation of the time. So, we work with what we have, and the Eritrean human rights activists has been working with the UN. After long lobbying and exercises, the UN started to look at Eritrea very closely since 2004 by appointing a special rapporteur. I think that's a French term, but the UN just appointed a special reporter of Eritrea to investigate Eritrea and to report to the UN. That in itself is largely unnecessary. People have been studying Eritrea, scholars have been studying human rights organizations. They have been writing reports. The special rapporteur didn't come with anything new. I have Professor Trisha here. She has been writing about Eritrea for many years. Professor Duncan has been writing. These human rights organizations have been writing. Incidentally, the special rapporteur appointed by the UN was a former employee of Amnesty International. But because the UN is not that much committed to human rights, it's really slow and it takes time. They couldn't take seriously the reports of these human rights organizations and the reports of scholars. They need to have somebody look at the human rights situation. And that's why the UN appointed a special rapporteur on Eritrea. The mandate is to look at the human rights situation in the country and to report after 1 year to the Human Rights Council. The mandate holder did that in about a year. She wrote a very good report. That report was considered by the Human Rights Council. And after considering the report, the Council reviewed the mandate. It basically said, okay, we're going to give you another year. Look at those issues again. For the second time, the special rapporteur paid special attention to two areas. The indefinite constitution that's going on in Eritrea, and then to the extrajudicial detentions and abuse going on in the country. And again, a year later, the special rapporteur report, and the report was considered by the Human Rights Council. And then the council realized that this was very serious, and they decided to appoint a commission of inquiry. It's just as little fun to me, instead of having one person investigating the country, now you have 3 commissioners. And the name is, of course, more serious than the special rapporteur. And the commission of inquiry was, I guess, established in 2014 after the UN Human Rights Council considered 2 reports from the special rapporteur. And the council investigated Eritrea. After 1 year, it came with a report. The report was considered. And again, the Human Rights Council mandated the commission of inquiry to do more research, to do more fact-finding about Eritrea. In the first report, the commission of inquiry stated that there are, gross human rights violations, very systemic. But it stopped short of saying that crimes against humanity are going on in the country. So the second mandate of the commission was to, address that issue very closely, whether crimes against humanity are being committed in Eritrea or not. And we do have a second report from the Commission of Inquiry clearly saying that crimes against humanity are being committed in Eritrea. And the Commission of Inquiry also recommended that the whole situation in Eritrea should be referred to the Security Council for consideration. We do not have like an international court of human rights. We do not have an international criminal court. We do have one, but that is not international in a sense. It is an organ established by a treaty, and it doesn't assume automatic jurisdiction unless a particular country consents to be under that court. So the only way of taking the court if a certain country is not a signatory to the treaty that establishes the court is to have the Security Council referring the matter to the court. The Security Council, as you guys know, could address such a situation in different ways. One of these is to address and to refer it to International Criminal Court for investigation and prosecution. So this whole exercise within and before the Human Rights Council has ended and has put it at a level where the Council has recommended that the situation be referred to the Security Council. I don't think the Security Council actually needs any formal referral. It could take it could recognize the situation in Eritrea by its own motion. But it's always a plus to have these human rights bodies pushing this subject, asking the Security Council to do something. Of course, the Council and the Human Rights Council has asked that this situation should go to the Security Council with the aim of, having some sort of accountability, having the top leaders of the country to face those charges before the International Criminal Court. So this is where we are now at this moment. I'm not sure if the case is going to be referred. At the very least, it's going to require more work from Eritreans, activists, more lobbying and more pressure. But even if we get a referral, and even if the Security Council takes the Eritrean case, having it referred to the International Criminal Court is not simple. This will be an exercise under Chapter 7 of the Charter, where a single member, overwhelming member, could stop the decision. And some people say that we have China.
Louder.
Thank you. So some people worry that we have China and other countries in the Council who may block, any referral of Eritrea to the ICC. Even if you get referral to the ICC, then the court has to evaluate the situation in Eritrea. This is just judicial economics. We have one court and we have different situations in this world. So is the situation in Eritrea the one that the court should deal with? It's a matter of prioritizing. In the language of the court, then the point will be whether the situation in Eritrea is grave enough to merit the attention of this single court that we have at the international level. But reaching there would be a success in itself, but it doesn't get you too far. We do have the Sudanese president, charged by the International Criminal Court. Arrest warrants are already issued. But having him face justice is a different issue because we don't have international police who go to the hunt, leading states, leaders of states. So overall, this is something. The state we are now is something. A lot of effort has been put on it, and it's an achievement in itself. But it doesn't satisfy me. At least it's not something that could remove a dictator so instantly. And that's the nature of the international mechanism for protection of rights that we have. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have our second presenter now. Trisha Rodriguez-Hefner.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Trisha Hefner, but you can call me Fox. event. I confess that he didn't really have to twist my arm very hard to get me to say yes to coming. It's a wonderful experience always to come to San Francisco, and also because I recognize that this was a particularly important time to talk about many of the issues that we're covering here today. I also want to say thank you to everyone who came here to participate and to listen. I know that I'm the out-of-towner and have been made to feel very welcome, but I hope that it's appropriate for me to also say to all of you, So since McLaren first extended this invitation to me some months ago, I confess that I found myself thinking a lot about what I wanted to say at this event. Reflecting on the theme of the panel, which is human rights, peace, and tolerance, I realized that there were so many things that I could talk about and so many different angles that I might take. So for example, I thought I might talk about what I've learned from 20 years of anthropological research on Eritrea and the diaspora, or about my broader scholarship on refugee and asylum rights, or maybe I could talk about my more recent work on transitional justice in northern Uganda and how that's really helped me to see and understand the Eritrean context in new ways. I also considered giving the kind of standard academic research presentation on the project that I started in 2009, examining the emergence and trajectories of a global and transnational Eritrean human rights movement, particularly among post-2001 refugees and asylum seekers. So as many of you here know from your own experiences, this movement has become even more robust, more visible, more significant since the escalation of the global refugee crisis. And Eritrea is a very important element in this global refugee crisis, as we've been talking about today. And for most of the past decade and a half, Eritrea has been among the top 12 refugee-producing countries. But this refugee crisis also goes far beyond Eritrea. And in the end, any refugee crisis is not only about refugees, it's also about political and economic crises. All refugee crises are really political and economic crises at their core. These political and economic crises, of which refugees are largely a symptom, are also not just crises in the countries that produce refugees. They're crises of the entire global system and of the humanitarian apparatuses and the human rights regimes that are part of it. So as I thought about what to discuss today, what kind of expertise I could offer, I also found myself reflecting how I've never been comfortable being called or calling myself an expert. This might sound a bit ironic given that the notion of the expert has actually made it possible for me to draw on my academic knowledge and my experience to help hundreds of individual Eritreans and their families in the context of asylum and refugee decisions. In the asylum and refugee context, for better and for worse, being considered an expert makes all of the difference. As my colleagues and I have recently written about in our book, African Asylum at a Crossroads, the expert is more important than ever at a time when governments and legal systems adopt harsher and more restrictive asylum and refugee policies and practices. Yet far from an expert, I've always considered myself just a student of Eritrea. As a student of Eritrea, my primary goal has been to listen and to understand, not to profess or declare. And my curiosity about Eritrea has mainly been driven by a genuine political commitment and a shared humanism. I have always been first and foremost a sister in solidarity and a deep admirer of the Eritrean struggles, and I mean the plural intentionally, for I think there have been more than one, for liberation and for justice. I was drawn to Eritrea not so much as an academic project, although the intellectual puzzle has kept me busy for about 20 years now, but because like so many other people, both Eritrean and not, I was deeply inspired by the progressive elements of the Eritrean Revolution. On the path to independence and driven by the demand for self-determination, which is a collective human right, the Eritrean Revolution elevated the status of women, broke down aspects of ethno-regional and religious divisions, expanded the provision of social services, and articulated a deeply important and trenchant critique of the inequities and the iniquities of imperialism, neoliberalism, and northern/western interventionism. These may have been strategic, contradictory, and limited transformations, but they were real, and they were and they are significant. So in addition to taking this conference as an opportunity to reconnect with dynamic Eritrean perspectives, I decided to speak from the heart as well as from the head, and especially to the younger generation of Eritrean researchers and activists as they contend with a more complex terrain of struggle than ever before. Literally, a new terrain, a new set of global dynamics, a new revolution. For if there's one thing that the sustained and comparative study of revolutions has shown us, time and again, it's that a revolution is always inherently unfinished. It does not begin and end with the replacement of one system of governance with another. It does not represent a clear and dramatic break with the past and the dawn of something altogether new, but rather it pulls through fundamental threads from the past, even as it rearranges them and gives rise to new patterns. A revolution is not an event. It's not a series of strategic victories. It's a process, a social and a cultural one, as much as a political and an economic one. And like the word revolve itself, it does not move forward through history in a specific direction, barreling towards some inevitable endpoint or an ultimate resolution to the dilemmas of the human condition. Rather, it circles back, around, and into itself. It might devolve. It might even implode with its own centripetal and inward-looking force. And a revolution always gives rise in its midst to the forces that seek to carry it forward still, to demand that the idealistic and the utopian visions and promises made in revolutionary moments may in fact be realized as genuine properties of the social system. And so while revolutions begin with a vision of new possibilities and remain inherently unfinished, they likewise contain within them, contested as they may be, the seeds and the roots of yet further visions and projects, themselves made possible by the original revolutionary moment. As the anthropologist and intellectual architect of the Occupy Wall Street movement, David Graeber has powerfully argued in relationship to the contemporary crisis of global capitalism and the suffering it wreaks on humanity and the planet, from the destruction of the environment to the illogic of unending wars and interventions that generate huge numbers of refugees. The meaning of revolution that we must recover collectively for humanity is literally to begin again. But to begin again does not necessarily entail a capturing or a recapturing of the state. It can mean to initiate new forms of revolutionary action in which organized but decentralized groups create the kind of politics they wish to see outside the state. And doing that may require literally escaping the state, evading it rather than confronting it. In that space of decentralized autonomy from the state, then a prefigurative politics can emerge as a new revolutionary project. As Graeber writes, one cannot create freedom through authoritarian means. In fact, as much as possible, one must oneself and one's relations with one's friends and allies embody the kind of society one wishes to create. So another thing that we know about revolutions is that they fail. In saying that they fail, we do not condemn them, we do not condemn their value or declare them inevitably doomed or mistaken. In saying that revolutions fail, what we mean is that because they are inherently incomplete, because they are rife with contradictions, because they exist in a complex global system and can never be sealed off from external forces, they cannot and they do not live up to what they originally promised. So rather than talking specifically about the Eritrean revolution in this context, let me pick up another thread. Let me discuss another major revolution in world history, one whose reverberations continue to shape the globe today, and that is the human rights revolution. As in other revolutions, and especially those driven by a powerful, shared, underlying ideological foundation or a belief system, such as secular nationalism or zealous religious faith, the human rights revolution is also inherently incomplete. I think, as my colleague Simon pointed out very well, it's also rife with contradictions. It has also failed, and it needs to be reinvented again if we are to collectively realize its vision and its promises in a genuine way. And that too may need to occur outside the halls of the United Nations and governments. It may also need to evade the domination of humanitarian and state-based governance. So let me clarify that a little bit. The canonical narrative of the history of the human rights movement, its own creation story, locates the emergence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the founding document in the modern human rights corpus, in the aftermath of World War II. In particular, the brutality and the baseness of the Nazi genocide and the violent political repression of the Third Reich led the founding Human Rights Commission, comprised of representatives from the US, China, France, and Lebanon, to draft the first International Bill of Human Rights. The purpose was to delineate a set of basic rights and obligations that could be deemed truly universal, meaning equally applicable to all people at all times, in all places, regardless of what cultural, religious, or political economic system they lived in. Moreover, the International Bill of Human Rights, which later became the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR, and which itself gave rise to the now dozen or so legally binding human rights conventions, was rooted in several core principles. First and foremost was the notion of inherent human worth and dignity. Secondly was the idea that governments, irrespective of their political orientation, have the obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of their citizens. Finally, the UDHR heralded the beginnings of an international legal system that provided people recourse to a higher authority should their own governments and domestic legal systems prove unwilling or unable to respect, protect, and fulfill the basic rights of their citizens. A core objective of the modern human rights movement was to signify and to legally codify the commitment that never again in the course of history would such abuses of state power and violations of life and dignity occur. And yet there were already distinct ironies at work. In 1948, when the UDHR was adopted, the vast majority of humanity was excluded from its purview because they lived under colonial administration. Moreover, the very same powers that articulated and celebrated this vision of universal human dignity and rights were among those that colonized and brutalized non-Western and indigenous populations. Even the very concept of human rights, while intended to be universal, was in fact catalyzed by a specific expression of Euro-American culture and politics. The UDHR emerged as a reaction to European brutality, and yet the recognition of this brutality did not extend to a critique of Italian fascism in the Horn of Africa, to the violent exploitation of the Congo by Belgium, to the grip of white supremacy in apartheid South Africa or the Jim Crow American South, or to the genocidal extermination and displacement of indigenous peoples in the Americas. Nevertheless, the post-war human rights vision has resonated so powerfully across the globe that in fact many people around the world, including those living under the yoke of colonialism and occupation, adopted its language, its logic, and its legal force to make their specific demands, including for revolutionary and anti-colonial purposes. In Eritrea's own struggle for self-determination, and in some of the documents of the period, we can read very clearly the international human rights claims at the heart of the nationalist independence movement. In adopting human rights discourse, practice, and law, people in every corner of the world have done what ecologist Sally Mary calls vernacularized human rights. They have translated their own specific struggles and grievances into the language of human rights to gain greater traction beyond their narrow circumstances. And they have also adopted the norms and concepts formulated internationally to reformulate the global terms in which their struggles play out. Yet, like all revolutions, the human rights revolution is inherently incomplete, and it's rife with contradictions and failures. These contradictions and failures have rendered human rights discourse and norms vulnerable to exploitation and to hijacking by cynical regimes of power whose own empirical behavior is often dramatically at odds with the substance of human rights discourse and law. Thus, under the guise of protecting human rights, the US launches repeated interventions in the Middle East, and in the process engages in organized murder. For what else is war than that? Extrajudicial execution, detention without charge, and torture. Human rights are in this example, and in so many more, manipulated to mask intentions and justify practices that literally undermine their foundation. During the Cold War of the 1950s and 60s, in a reflection of the political economic conflict between the capitalist West and the communist East, the UN member states initiated a split between the two major categories of rights: individual civil and political rights, and collective economic, social, and cultural rights. Although these were formulated in the UDHR as indivisible and mutually constitutive, such that one could not enjoy the freedom of conscience and participation in government if one did not have sufficient education, employment, or nutrition, the subsequent conventions separated and parsed these rights, encouraging a deep rift that is all too often exploited in claims to power. The prioritization of any one set of rights over another is detrimental to the realization of all human rights, and yet very frequently we observe intractable battles over which set of rights must be prioritized. We hear this in the familiar claims that Eritrea must first realize economic stability and collective security before it can respect, protect, and fulfill freedom of conscience and expression, for example. We observe it too in the US's overwhelming concern for civil and political rights in Eritrea and its utter silence on matters of structural inequality and collective security. Cultural differences too have blinded and biased us to viewing certain human rights as either valid or invalid. This often leads to unnuanced and essentialized versions of cultural identity and tradition to assert what is, in fact, a position of domination. For instance, if one makes a claim that forcing women to undergo genital surgery is essential to maintaining tradition and cultural identity, then we really need to ask, in whose interest is it to define cultural identity and tradition in such a way as to maintain women in a vulnerable and exploited position? Like many ideas and visions that have over time hardened into ideologies and even dogmas, human rights is often projected by its proponents as though it exists in some neutral space, floating above the fray of politics, perhaps offering a divine pathway to a higher moral authority. But as both its detractors and its constructive critics point out, there is ample evidence that human rights is manipulated and hijacked by forces wishing to disguise imperialist or exploitative aims, advancing critiques that are rife with cultural assumptions and generalizations about the other. At the very least, it's a distinct hypocrisy to point out human rights violations in other countries while refusing to acknowledge one's own, or to reject human rights critiques of one's own government, by pointing to the failures of another. In my view, to imagine that human rights is somehow a neutral project is empirically mistaken and it's politically naive. Human rights today has become politics by other means. And yet, critical human rights proponents, myself included, will also argue that a genuine commitment to human rights must be grounded in principles that transcend any particular political context, to critique all political contexts on the basis of those principles. To adopt a principled human rights position is to enact in both discourse and practice a consistent cross-cultural and universal orientation, to critique injustice in one's own society as readily as one critiques it in other societies, to value the human dignity of people who are inherently different from you and whom you may never meet face to face, to value an Eritrean life as much as an American or an Afghani or a Syrian or an Ethiopian life. By all of this, I mean to point out that human rights has the capacity to serve liberating agendas, but it may also be used to entrench power and inequality. The human rights revolution, in my opinion, will remain inherently incomplete as long as we struggle to realize the former capacity against the latter. Now, how do these threads come together? In what way can we address the intersection of the Eritrean revolution with the human rights revolution? And why is this an important thing to do, especially now in the midst of the refugee crisis and the international spotlight on Eritrea's human rights record? As early as the 1930s, the German Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt, herself a refugee from Hitler's genocidal campaign, noted that refugees were the ultimate test of any conception of human rights. Much more recently, the anthropologist Michel Agier has written that the experience of refugees literally underlies the question of what universal human rights people effectively have access to if they lose the use of their national citizenship. I think this is relevant to the Eritrean case today, because as I tracked the emergence of a specifically Eritrean movement for human rights globally, it has primarily grown out of the experiences of recent, post-2001, refugees and asylum seekers. In becoming refugees and asylum seekers, these people have literally evaded the state and now work to create an alternative politics framed in terms of human rights. In addition to addressing the conditions in Eritrea that give rise to refugee and asylum flows, Eritrean human rights movements also connect Eritreans globally to one another, to the societies they find themselves in, and to an international community where they engage with entities like foreign governments, the United Nations, and international NGOs. In this way, I have observed how a specifically Eritrean deployment of human rights discourse and practice simultaneously pushes back against eroding commitments to asylum and refugee protection and the abuses inherent to the humanitarian system that manages refugees, how they object to the discrimination and the racism in societies of settlement, how they push back with ever greater boldness against the political intolerance and the violence that has come to characterize state-sanctioned nationalism in Eritrea proper. In the course of my inquiry, I have also sought to understand how the language and the organizational strategies of Eritrean human rights activism represents a continuation of the Eritrean revolution itself, pushing an incomplete and perhaps a failed project towards new patterns and possibilities. I have also wondered whether Eritrean human rights organizing might represent a post-nationalist position. That is, a form of political consciousness that breaks out of the insularism and the exceptionalism that is at the heart of nationalist projects everywhere. I think the answer to the former question, whether Eritrean human rights organizing is a continuation of the revolution in some important sense, and yet also something new, is yes. In regards to the second, whether it represents a post-nationalist position, I think the answer is no. Not yet, but we're getting closer, I think, from what I've heard today. And this is because Eritrean human rights movements have yet to embrace the twin project of pushing forward the larger human rights revolution. What does that mean? It means that Eritrean human rights activists and proponents must recognize that human rights projects are political projects, but they must not allow human rights to become the new language of insular and exceptionalist nationalism. They must strive to be true internationalists, true universalists. They must study and learn from other struggles in order to understand their own. They must join in solidarity movements with different groups facing similar issues. They must engage not just with one another, but in solidarity with other people and movements, from Palestinians to Black Lives Matter. They must care as much about the individual life and dignity of an Ethiopian, an American, a Syrian, as they do about other Eritreans. They must love their enemies and defend the rights of their enemies because it is the principled thing to do, not the politically expedient thing to do. And they must not be naive or reckless in their engagements with powerful yet self-interested entities, from the European Union to the United Nations, to the United States, or Ethiopia. They must defend human rights principles and universalism from the regimes of power that would hijack them and manipulate them. And above all, they must create, outside the grasp of the Eritrean state, and perhaps all states in general, the kind of society they wish to see, not just in Eritrea, but globally. The Italian political philosopher Antonio Gramsci wrote that moments of crisis are when the old is dying and the new cannot yet be born. Moments of crisis are also profoundly creative, and they generate new possibilities, even if they are dangerous and frightening. Both Eritrea and the international human rights movement are in crisis, and the engagement between them reveals that with a new kind of clarity. So let's use this crisis to remake both the meaning of the Eritrean Revolution and the human rights revolution together. Thank you.
We're going to open it for questions. I just want to say a couple of things about Rahash and Bernard Well and Simon's presentation. I feel that they basically say they half full empty and half full, correct? I think Simon very well line up some of the problems we have with international law, the lack of enforcement, the slowness of the processes. I just want to share with you, when I'm very negative, I cry, but when I'm positive, I'm thinking, for instance, in my country, in Argentina, we had a dictatorship from 76 to 83. 30,000 people disappeared in a country of 50 million. And these guys are on trial now. Some of them are dying, but it's a very slow process, but justice arrives. So I'm very optimistic on that. I also think that we need to recognize the amazing role of activists and the way that activists take documents that are absolutely individualistic, benefiting the global north, and they use it in a very strategic way to do things and to gain power. And that's what I think is very important. And the other idea that I think is key to remember, that these are processes, and they are in constant movement, and we always have to start new things. And the last thing that I want to say to start asking questions is that I was thinking about the refugees, which is a key issue at this moment. And there's a singer, a composer from Uruguay. His name is Jorge Drexler, and some of you may know him because he won an Oscar for the song Al Otro Lado del Rio in the Motorcycle Diaries of the Life of Che Guevara. Anyway, he was at a concert in New York I was in New York last week. No, a concert in San Francisco, and he mentioned at the concert, he was talking about refugees, and he told the stories of his grandparents who were trying to leave Germany, and no country will give them a place to come to the country. So they were actually begging embassies. So his father was a little baby. So finally Bolivia gave them a place to come, and they were able to go to Bolivia. And here's a beautiful song that is called Bolivia, singing all that. And the thing that it repeats all the time is, in Spanish is, una puerta giratoria, no más que eso es la historia, which is like a revolving door. History is only that. and just trying to make this kind of political call in this fancy concert about that it happened there, it's happening now, it can happen to us tomorrow, correct? So starting that, maybe we can now start asking questions to these wonderful speakers. Yeah, do you have a mic there? Yes, you can talk, but you're looking for a mic. Oh, okay, sorry, there's one.
Oh.
Okay, we have one in the back. First, and then go to the second.
Right here. Here.
Yeah. Okay, second. No, one in the back. You're second.
Thank you, Professor. And, I'm a layman to anthropology, though, but I have a conscious life. Before universally associate with the other human rights revolutionizing societies, internally, let me guess, like, for example, the statisticians used to say, like, the Simpson paradox, because the internal element by itself has correlated, at least narrow the gap between the elements, and then solidifying this would have bridge the dynamics by making stable the entropy within the internal force. That's my guess anyway. So on this issue, how would you correlate before you talk with the other Palestinian, whatever? I'm not saying about Eritrea or Afghan or whatever. Let's say the society A, society B, and how would you correlate it? Tell us the story about that. Thank you.
Sure. So I actually think that your question gets to two issues. One is that, and correct me if I misunderstand you, I think one of the issues that your question gets to is how is it that human rights commitments or a respect for human rights emerges in each society in and of itself, right? How does that happen? And in some sense, I think what you're asking is how does that happen before one society can then connect with another across whatever common human rights concerns they might have, right? So am I understanding what you're asking, more or less?
Yeah, but I'm trying to presume the shape that you can tend to that by solidifying the internal. You're right, being that I would like to see the dynamics of the internal forces rather than the centrifugality of the other one.
Mm-hmm. So, as I said, I think there's two things. One, I think, is that regardless of where modern human rights concepts came from and how they got written down on paper, one of the things that led to this notion of universal human rights is that across cultural contexts, across religious contexts, even deep in human history, we find the basic elements of human rights already present in societies around the world. And so creating these legal concepts or these international concepts was really more an outgrowth of something that's already present in human societies across the world, right? A shared commitment or a shared sense of morality that it's wrong for governments to abuse their people, that, you know, killing people and torturing people is a bad thing to do. These kinds of moralities are already present in various societies. And so human rights just sort of gives a kind of, a new kind of expression to that. But I don't think that one society has to sort its own human rights issues out before it connects with other societies. I think, in fact, it's the reverse. I think that more often than not, it's when societies begin to share their experiences across one another and recognize where the patterns of repression and intolerance exist, that then this kind of shared international language can emerge and social movements can emerge across societies that push back against these abuses of state power. And I really think that that's one of the things, I mean, if I can be very candid with all of you, I think that that's one of the things that has set Eritrea back, is this tendency to only really think about what's happening in Eritrea as if it's unique, as if it's isolated, as if no other society has gone through these experiences. Of course there's unique things about Eritrea. That's why most of us who are non-Eritreans find it so fascinating. But I do think that Eritreans did direct more of their conversation or their dialogue outside of their own communities, that they would see that their experiences are not unique, and that it would provide them with a greater set of tools and ideas and possibilities for how to affect transformation. This is one of the things that working in Uganda has taught me. And I've had Eritrean friends who have come to visit me in northern Uganda and said, I thought we were the only society that suffered. Clearly that's not the case. And through that experience, people come to see theirs in a new way, and that's very, very powerful.
Yes, all right, thank you. Thanks a lot to both of you for the fantastic presentation. My first question was to Simon. It's about a commission of inquiry. Great work was done 2 months ago when I was reading an article about it. One of the weaknesses that was mentioned was that all the inquiry was done outside but not in here. So I want to know your take on that.
Do you
Part of it, we spoke out because we have the ability to do so. But imagine instead of reaching back on, shutting them out and all it does to people not to speak their opinion, at the same time saying that they were not inquired, they were not referred in this country. So what's your take on that when you say in the future they were not inquired, access was not given to them properly?
Yes.
And my second question to Ms. Betna. Thank you and God bless you for being interested in us, for raising yourself into the position to be a student. I know many people have been in charge of Eritrea's decisions assigned by legal governments, also by Washington DC, but they never raised themselves in a position to be a student. So as to be a good decision maker, see a good decision maker in you, because you're studying that and let us do our part to help you to get your progress. I'm a student, so I'm going to ask you a question. I'm impressed by the post-nationalism that you mentioned. Can you give us an example of a good of a country or a system that has been successful in post-nationalism, which is similar to Eritrean status, at least in the development, or a post-nationalist leader who's been a good example for us.
Can I add to what the post-nationalism? You said the continuation of the revolution was the problematic, for the human rights activists. So, being the ideology socialism, do you see it as a problem? So that the current position or whether political, they have to go away with socialism and go another political system. Thank you.
Okay, so Simon, you go first, maybe.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the criticisms directed towards the Commission of Inquiry, the fact that the Commission was not able to visit Eritrea. But that's not the problem with the Commission itself. The Commission repeatedly asked the Commission to visit Eritrea. That permission has been denied. But does the fact that the Commission never visited Eritrea in any way reduce the quality of the report that they have already published? No, it's a good report, and you could evaluate the quality of the report in different ways. First, as I have said already, they didn't come up with anything new. They just confirmed the research made by scholars, very reputable organizations. And Eritreans are everywhere. You know, you don't need to go inside Eritrea to interview Eritreans. You have plenty and many refugees in Sudan, in Ethiopia. And the Commission of Inquiry and the Special Rapporteur they did visit refugee camps in Ethiopia, in Djibouti, and other countries. And they also interviewed Eritrean, diaspora Eritreans in Europe and in America. I'm here, I've been here for maybe close to 8 years, but I do know what's going on inside Eritrea, what's going on to my parents. And I can give you a complete picture of the situation in Eritrea, because we're not living in isolation. We are always in touch with our president inside the country. So if you interview President Cameron, I think the fact that you never went to Eritrea is not that much problem.
Okay, thank you for the very good questions, and they're challenging questions. So I'll see what I can do to answer them reasonably well. So I think I would start out by saying that nationalism is a strategic project. And certainly I think Eritrean nationalism served a very important purpose. That it drove the revolution, it drove the independence struggle, it achieved its goals in that regard. It was important for achieving what it set out to do. But I think that at some point nationalism ceases to be very strategically helpful, and it begins to become more of a limitation on a society. If I try to think about an example of a country that I might describe, or that might be analogous to Eritrea, whose trajectory may have taken it someplace different after the moment of the nationalist revolution, I might point to Cuba. Now, that's not to say that Cuba is a perfect place, and Cuba has certainly been punished by its much larger, dominant neighbor to the north, and it has been, its revolution has been in many ways kind of strangled. But Cuba really did adopt a kind of a more internationalist orientation following the Cuban Revolution. So nationalism served its purpose, and Cuba opened itself to a more internationalist kind of current. I think Nicaragua is another good example. The Nicaraguan Revolution, the Sandinistas effected a revolution and then they stepped down. I'm not a Latin Americanist, so I can't speak with authority about these two specific contexts, but they seem to me that it would not be time wasted if Eritrean activists studied the Cuban trajectory and the Nicaraguan trajectory to learn something more maybe about their own particular experience, national experience. In terms of the question, does it require giving up socialism? No, I don't think it does. I think in both of these examples, in the Sandinista Revolution and in the Cuban Revolution, socialism was at the core of what was being established, was being fought for. And socialism is, to me, an inherently, or really can be, an inherently internationalist kind of project. There are, of course, socialist nationalisms, and there was a nationalist socialism, which turned out very badly for Germany and for Europe, as it turns out. Nazism, right? I mean, that's not a particularly happy expression. But I don't think that it requires giving up a kind of socialist orientation. No, I don't.
Another question?
One last question.
Two more.
Okay, two more.
Okay. My question is directed to Professor Trishan. You said during the Eritrean struggle, nationalism has been kind of strategy, and we also know that during that time, many of the top leaders that traveled to communist countries like to Russia, he's training in Russia, even the current leader himself. So, what do you think? Do you think these communist ideologies had a big influence in directing the ideals that were embedded in the struggle itself and the visions that they held after independence project for Eritrea? Because of the research that you've done on Eritrea, you must have come across these things, and what do you think is the influence? And do you think that it was too ideological, that they are still probably holding into that, so they are not really able to accept this new world, like this capitalist world, and that they are trying
finding it hard to give up those ideas that they developed back during the struggle. So I would like to hear your ideas on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think during the struggle there was, I think Eritrea did participate in a kind of socialist internationalism. But in my reading of Eritrean history, that was always also very strategic. The primary goal was always a nationalist one. It wasn't necessarily to build a kind of, permanent revolution around the world, created through, class solidarity internationally. It seemed to be much more about creating strategic kinds of alliances in socialist or communist countries, with socialist and communist countries, and with movements. I mean, during the struggle, the EPLF did build, to some degree, some limited movement, some limited solidarity with, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, even engaging with the Black Panther Party. But these also seem to be very strategic engagements designed to elevate and promote the nationalist position over and above a kind of internationalism. So I think that socialism, communism, was an important way for Eritrea to enter into a kind of global conversation, to draw attention to its own particular struggle. But I think nationalism won the day, and I think that Eritrea shut itself down from outside influences, regardless of whether they were, neoliberal capitalists, or whether they were ultimately, with other countries that had a more socialist kind of agenda. I mean, there could have been much broader alliances that Eritrea built with countries that still had a kind of left-wing or socialist orientation. In Latin America, for example, Eritrea didn't do that. It remained, or it turned inward onto itself and became very isolated, deliberately so. So I don't know that the internationalism of socialism was really very genuinely embraced. I think it was very strategically embraced by Eritrea, and I think that there was another part of your question that you followed up with. Whether it should give up this kind of orientation in order to engage with a kind of capitalist model. No, I don't. I mean, I'm a person of the left. I think that there have to continue to be movements that push back against neoliberalism, against capitalism. I think that Eritrea is actually quite strategically engaging with neoliberal capitalism right now. I mean, the mining efforts going on, right? I mean, this is one way in which Eritrea is opening itself to a very particular kind of capitalist investment. So I don't know that the ideology is really what is so important now. I mean, I think nationalism and maintaining state control is the ideology. I think all of these other things, a critique of neoliberalism, of capitalism, I think I'm not convinced it's entirely genuine.
Thank you, Simon, Harway, and Terhaz Hafte. You guys did a really good job, good presentation. My question is going to be geared to both of you, so you both can respond. I don't know Simon very well. I'm beginning to know him now. Trisha and I, it's been a few years. She's been very supportive of us women as the life in our movement. And you have studied and done research, like you said, almost back to 2000, 2001, and knew the younger generation back then, members of EMDHR that were in South Africa, who told me a lot about me when I first started. And you see us now. I really want to know what your take is on that dichotomy. If you've seen any change, and what we can do together to work together as far as inclusivity, including youth, young adults, especially Eritrean-Americans, because we come from a different background. And Simon, you guys that are from Asmara, University of Asmara, all the educated young men, how can we work together? Because I definitely feel like there is a gap, and there's kind of like us here and then you guys. And what do you think we can do to bridge that gap? Because we all come from the same place and we have the same heart, at the end of the day. Even though we were not in Eritrea, our roots are there. And we want to work with you guys. So what do you guys think about these issues,
I'll try to be brief. That's a really good question. It's a really difficult question too. So the work that I did starting in 1995 was really focusing on the earlier generations of people who left Eritrea as students and later as refugees. So people who were coming to the United States in particular starting in the late 1960s and mainly the 1970s and 80s. And of course the split there was ELF and EPLF, right? That was the predominant issue. But even during the time that I was doing the research for that project, and people were really very attuned to this Jabhat Shabia kind of split, there was also a generational dimension already present, such that young people who were coming a little bit later, say in the 1990s, after independence, had a very hard time relating to the people who had come in the 1970s and 80s, because their experience back in Eritrea was different than it was during the time of the struggle. And already there were efforts of those younger, newer immigrants or refugees or asylum seekers to create their own independent institutions that were addressing many of the needs of newly arrived refugees that we've been hearing about today. And they were really prevented from developing that kind of autonomy by either those who were affiliated with Shabia or Jabhat trying to kind of pull them in one political direction or another and kind of preventing them from developing autonomous organizations. And that pattern seems to repeat. I feel like I continue to observe this pattern even now. I think there seems to be greater continuity between those people who left, so like people in Simon's cohort who left in the early 2000s, and then those who are arriving now. But this is one of the things about what we would call political generations of migrants, is that their experiences are really steeped in what happened to them before they left home and then along the way, and that these can create certain kinds of divisions that are difficult to overcome once they arrive. And then when you add to it those who were born here, or born in the diaspora, then you have yet another kind of dilemma in terms of a division among different cohorts of people. So it's really hard to say. I mean, I wish I could tell you what I think is the best way to bridge these gaps. Having these kinds of conversations, I think, is a really important way of doing that, and really fundamentally looking for, okay, so everybody has these very different experiences, these pre-migration experiences that shape who they are after migration, or conversely, having been born in the diaspora, right? So what are the things that everybody shares across all of these different experiences and generational differences? And focus on those as the kind of core principles around which people organize. The thrust to kind of always centralize and always, I know the language of unity is really important and coordination is really important, but this drive to constantly centralize, I think, is part of the same sort of repeating dynamic, that there needs to be more space for decentralization, for autonomy, and that the linkages among these different kinds of movements emerge out of these shared principles and commitments that people feel, not out of a sense of we have to be unified because we're going to recapture and control the state. That's what I was trying to say about, maybe you need to evade the state. Maybe capturing the state shouldn't be the objective, because what do you do with the state once you capture it? If you don't have any kind of decentralized civil society that has emerged, where people can kind of get along on the basis of shared principles despite differences, then what are you going to do with the state once you've got it? Reproduce a kind of overly centralized authoritarian kind of dynamic, in my opinion. I don't know. And this is just what I feel like I've learned from being with Eritreans, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it. If I am, I hope you all will help me understand it better.
About working together. I do agree that the level of cooperation that we have now, it may not be enough. I think everybody would like to see more of that. On the other hand, though, it's good to be very realistic. Most of you here are volunteers, human rights activists. You have a life that you want to lead, and you have family members that you need support. In fact, we are very much encumbered, with poor family members back home. The degree of commitment that we could take to help the political situation is very limited. I think we should also, acknowledge our commitments. Sometimes our activism looks very messy, very much disorganized, but perhaps that's the nature of that. I do talk with other people, Nigerian colleagues, Kenyan colleagues, and the degree of frustration that you read from them is not different from ours. So I'm inclined to believe that facing injustice is not simple. It takes time, it tests people, and it doesn't go as fast as everybody would like it to go. But yes, definitely I would like to see more cooperation, more working together, but having, of course, initiatives. We have here Sadat Johar is going to tell us maybe about the various initiatives that have been tried to bring at least civil organizations to work under umbrellas. I could mention the Eritrean Global Solidarity. That was an initiative aimed at bringing all these small organizations together, for visibility issue, for organizational issues. Sometimes we progress, sometimes we fail. And in certain instances, of course, people who work individually have been very much productive than organizations. And perhaps working together is not the only solution, or is not the only way of doing this activism effectively. We have been recognizing some individuals here. Mostly they work alone, and they have been very effective. I'm not sure, it's a difficult question. I do wish that we should work together more, but at the same time, we should also recognize our limitations and at times give credit to what we are already doing.
We don't have time for more questions. Do we have time? No. The boss says no more time. No, we have to have another panel. I just want to make one comment. I heard about the centralization issue and the importance of centralizing it, and I think that actually the other model is the network. Really big horizontal things and strategically dealing with people at the moment that you need without having to have a particular center, because the center always someone going with the rest of the problem. So it's better to keep the balance of power more in some way. The last thing I want to say, thank you to Mary for this again. And in the name of the University of San Francisco, because after all I work here, thank you to all of you, because this is, many of you have thanked the university and I'm thanking you, because I think that we have learned a lot and we have enriched our campus with your presence and your thoughts and your questions and your discussions. So that's it. Thank you.